The wheel was initially employed for overland transportation in Sumer. Its creation and widespread use enabled a wide range of vehicles from carts to chariots, and likely gave Sumer the distinction of being the first to use both ox power and horsepower for movement. Professor Samuel Kramer, one of Time's famous Sumerologists, studied the literary legacy discovered beneath Sumer's mounds in 1956. Each of the 25 chapters from the Tablets of Sumer described a Sumerian first, including the first schools, the first bicameral congress, the first historian, the first pharmacopoeia, the first farmer's almanac, the first cosmogony and cosmology, the first Job, the first proverbs and sayings, the first literary debates, the first Noah, the first library catalog, man's first heroic age, his first legal codes and social reforms, his first medicine, agriculture, and the quest for global peace and harmony. As a direct result of the development and adoption of writing, the first schools were created in Sumer. By beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE, archaeological evidence, such as actual school buildings, and textual evidence, such as exercise tablets, suggests the existence of a formal system of education. In Sumer, there were literally hundreds of scribes, from low scribes to high scribes, royal scribes, temple scribes, and scribes who held high state authority. Some of them worked as instructors in the schools, and we can still read their essays about the schools, their purposes and goals, curriculum, and teaching methods. Not only language and writing, but also science of the day, botany, zoology, geography, mathematics, and theology, were taught at the schools. Older literary works were studied and duplicated while new ones were written. The Umiya, expert professor, oversaw the schools, and the faculty always comprised a man in charge of drawing and a man in charge of Sumerian, as well as a man in charge of the whip. One school alumnus told how he had been beaten for missing school, for insufficient neatness, for loitering, for not being silent, for misbehaving, and even for not having neat handwriting on his clay tablets. The conflict between Erech and the city-state of Kish is the subject of an epic poem about Erech's history. The epic tale describes how Kish sent envoys to Erech to offer a peaceful solution to their quarrel. However, Gilgamesh, ruler of Erech at the time, preferred to fight rather than compromise. The fact that he had put the topic to a vote in the Assembly of the Elders, a local senate, is fascinating. The Lord Gilgamesh, before his elders of the city, put the matter and seeks out decision. Let us not submit to the house of Kish. Let us smite it with weapons. The elders' assembly, on the other hand, was intended for negotiations. Unfazed, though, Gilgamesh took the issue to the assembly of the fighting men, who voted in favor of war. The story's importance stems from the fact that it reveals that a Sumerian king had to address the matter of war and peace to the first bicameral congress almost 5,000 years ago. Kramer awarded the title of the first historian to Entemena, king of Lagash, who recorded his war with Umma on clay cylinders. The inscription of Entemena was straight prose, produced merely as a factual record of history, unlike other texts that were literary works or epic poems whose themes were historical events. Because Assyrian and Babylonian inscriptions were deciphered long before Sumerian records, it was long assumed that Babylonian monarch Hammurabi authored and decreed the first code of laws, about 1900 BCE. However, as Sumer's culture was revealed, it became evident that Sumer had the firsts in terms of the legal system, social concepts, and fair administration of justice. A Sumerian monarch of the city-state of Ishanuna, northeast of Babylon, enacted regulations that fixed maximum rates for commodities and rental of wagons and boats long before Hammurabi. ensuring that the impoverished were not persecuted. There were other rules governing crimes against person and property, as well as family matters and master-servant relationships. Lipit Ishtar, monarch of Isin, had enacted a law much earlier. The 38 rules on a partially intact tablet, copy of the original inscribed on stone stele, deal with real estate, slaves and servants, marriage and inheritance, boat hire, oxen hire, and tax defaults. Lipit Ishtar said in the preface to this code that he was acting on the orders of the great gods, who had commanded him to bring well-being to the Sumerians and the Akkadians, as Hammurabi also stated. Lipit Ishtar was not, however, the first Sumerian law encoder. Copy of rules inscribed by Ur-Nammu, monarch of Ur, approximately 2350 BCE, more than half a millennium before Hammurabi, have been discovered on fragments of clay tablets. The laws were enacted on the god Nanar's authority to stop and punish grabbers of citizens' oxen, sheep, and donkeys, so that the orphan will not fall prey to the wealthy, the widow not fall prey to the powerful, the man of 1 shekel not fall prey to the man of 60 shekels. Ur-Nammu also decreed honest and unchangeable weights and measurements. However, the Sumerian legal system and administration of justice date back considerably further. By 2600 BCE, the world had changed dramatically. So much must have happened in Sumer that Ensi Urukagina felt compelled to implement reforms. Scholars have described a long inscription by him as a priceless record of man's earliest social reform based on a feeling of liberty, equality, and fairness, a French Revolution imposed by a ruler 4,400 years before, July 1789. Urukagina's reform decree listed the evils of his period first, followed by the reforms. The main problems were supervisors' improper use of their authority to take the best for themselves, abuse of official standing, and monopolistic groups' extortion of high prices. Reform Edict outlawed all of these, as well as a slew of others. For a good donkey or house, an official could no longer establish his own price. A simple citizen could no longer be compelled by a big man. Blind, destitute, widowed, and orphaned people's rights were reaffirmed. Nearly 5,000 years ago, a divorced woman was granted legal protection. How long had Sumerian civilization lasted for a fundamental overhaul to become necessary? Urukagina said that his god Ningrisu had asked him to return the decrees of bygone days, implying that it had been a long time. The plain conclusion is that we need to go back to even older systems and regulations. The Sumerian laws were upheld by a judicial system that painstakingly recorded and archived sessions, judgments, and contracts. A court was normally made up of 3 or 4 judges, one of whom was a professional royal judge, and the others drawn from a panel of 36 men. Sumerians were concerned with justice, whereas Babylonians were concerned with making rules and regulations. They believed the gods created monarchs to provide justice in the realm. There are several parallels to be found here with the Old Testament conception of justice and morality. The Hebrews were ruled by judges even before they had kings. Rulers were assessed not on their conquest or money, but on how far they performed the righteous thing. The Jewish New Year is a 10-day period during which men's deeds are weighed and reviewed in order to decide their fate in the next year. After all, the first Hebrew patriarch, Abraham, came from the Sumerian city of Ur, city of Ur-Nammu, and his code. Thus, it's probably more than a coincidence that the Sumerians believed in a deity named Nanshi, who annually judged mankind in the same fashion. Sumerian concern for justice, or lack thereof, is also expressed in the earliest story of Job. Kramer was able to read a good portion of a Sumerian poem by piecing together fragments of clay tablet at the Istanbul Museum of Antiquities, which, like the biblical book of Job, dealt with the complaint of a righteous man who instead of being blessed by the gods, was made to suffer all manner of loss and disrespect. He shouted out in agony, "My righteous speech has been transformed into a lie." The unidentified suffering petitions his God in the second portion, similar to some passages in the Hebrew Psalms. "My God, you who are my Father, who begot me, I lift up my face beseeching you. How long will you neglect me and leave me unprotected, leave me without guidance?" Then follows a happy ending. The righteous words, the pure words uttered by him, his God accepted. His God withdrew his hand from evil pronouncement. Preceding the biblical book of Ecclesiastes by some 2 millennium, Sumerian proverbs conveyed many of the same concepts and witticisms. "If we are doomed to die, let us spend. If we shall live long, let us save. When a poor man dies, do not try to revive him. He who possesses much silver may be happy. He who possesses much barley may be happy. But who has nothing at all can sleep. It is not the heart which leads to enmity, it is the tongue which leads to enmity. In a city without watchdogs, the fox is the overseer."